started. Okay, so welcome everyone. We are Aztec Adaptive Sports. Thank you for coming to our last GBM of the semester. So sad. Kelly?
Yeah, I realized that our last GBM actually falls on the International Day of People with Disabilities. So I just wanted to add this in here to continue to spread awareness and understanding. This year's is actually not all disabilities are visible. And so as Aztec Adaptive Sports, our goal is to expand awareness for people with disabilities and strive for equal opportunity for people with disabilities, not just through sports, but just in everyday life as well. So I figured I'd just add this in here. Just keep spreading awareness and being awesome.
Awesome. All right, so today we have our guest speaker, Dana Mathewson, and then we're gonna be talking about some other e-board stuff after this. And again, it's our last meeting. Sad kitten. Okay, so this has been some of our guest speakers. In the past, we had Haven, Josh, Roderick, Shayna, and Bea, and then Dana and Patrick and Eva from CAF. Multiple Paralympians in here, super high level athletes. It's awesome, great semester, everyone. If you have any ideas for events next semester, like similar to the Among Us night or the trivia night, let us know. We're open to ideas. And then Taylor, do you want to talk about trivia night?
Yeah, so this event was on Tuesday, and honestly, it was so much fun to have all of the ENS orgs come together. There were like 4 other organizations that collaborated with all of us, and we had to just put on this really big event for all of our members and e-board members, and it was really big turnout, much more than I anticipated. I was expecting maybe like 60 people at most, but I put on the itinerary, there were like 80 people. So it was really fun, some friendly competition between all these organizations, some working opportunities as well. So that was really fun. We like gave out our prize and everything. That was sponsored by our Adapted Athletics, the collegiate program. So it was really cool.
Awesome, thanks Taylor. Yeah, so like she said, there was 80 participants, 15 teams. Unfortunately, some team from FPTO won, and they got each $10 gift cards from the Adapted Athletics program. All right, without further ado, wait, how do you even say that word? Ado? Is that right?
I think you nailed it. I think that's how you say it.
Okay. We have Dana here. She is a wheelchair tennis Paralympian. Is that correct? Paralympian?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Again, feel free, if anyone has any questions, you can of course jump in. I know you have some familiar faces here in the audience, so feel free to jump in with any questions. But typically, the first question we start with is, how did you get involved in the Paralympic adaptive sports movement in the beginning, and how long have you been involved?
Okay, so that's kind of a long answer. So I grew up in San Diego, which is why this is so cool talking to all of you. I became injured when I was 10 years old. So like the Spark Notes version of what happened to me is that I used to be a super active kid. My mom had me and my brother enrolled in like every single extracurricular that you could imagine. And soccer was the one that was like my favorite. And so I was at soccer practice, I was running sprints, and like my lower back started to hurt really bad. And it almost felt like someone was stabbing me. Like that's how extreme it kind of felt. And fast forward to at least like an hour, maybe 2 hours later. And I remember my legs felt like pins and needles and they felt really heavy. And then I looked at my foot and tried to move it and just nothing was happening. And they found out later that basically what happened was I got a really rare autoimmune disease called transverse myelitis, which is like a fancy way of saying that my immune system attacked my spine. And so it left me an incomplete paraplegic. So I'm able to like walk a little bit, but I need to use a wheelchair now. So I've been involved in, I guess, the disabled community since I was 10, but I didn't really start playing sports until I was maybe 12 or 13. And that's all due to my mom. So when I was in the hospital, she was talking to different like rec therapists and different, I think maybe other patients and stuff. I'm not really sure what was going on at the time, but she heard about like a multi-sport camp that was called JAWS. I think it stands for Junior Adaptive Wheelchair Sports Camp, I think it was. And they had like water sports that you play on land, obviously like tennis, basketball, hockey. Then there was like sailing, archery, like all sorts of cool stuff for me to do. And she was like, this is what you're going to do. She signed me up for that. She signed me up for wheelchair rugby. She signed me up for basketball and then eventually tennis. And I had zero interest in going to any of those events. Like I had never met anyone with a disability prior to my own injury. And so like, it's embarrassing to say now, but I really thought that everyone with any disability was also mentally disabled. And so for me, I couldn't understand how playing a sport with adaptive like rules would be fun at all. Like I didn't see how it would be comparable to what I was used to. So like I would literally cry on the way to these different like sports camps, but my mom would make me go to every single one because she was like, just because you're disabled now doesn't mean that you're not going to be an active kid. And I tried all those different sports that I mentioned, but I eventually went to a sports camp in Coronado for tennis. And that's kind of when things clicked for me. And I just kind of fell in love with tennis. And then you can fast forward to when I met people like Steve and Greg. I eventually started going to the Barnes Tennis Center in Point Loma. And that's where I started to play twice a week. And they became like my older brothers and like my family basically. And they taught me how to play tennis. So that's pretty much how I got introduced to the sport. From then I went to college at University of Arizona for tennis and then kind of went pro, maybe closer to the 2016 year before Rio. And I've been playing ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, Steve and Greg, Dana was saying that you guys had played some pranks and stuff on her.
Steve never did because Steve is an upstanding gentleman. But
Okay,
Greg,
I resemble that remark, Dana.
why don't you tell them about when you told me that there were two different kinds of rackets, Greg?
I don't recall any of that. I'm old and I forget things nowadays. So
Oh, good. Oh, Greg, I remember.
Dana finally got a sponsorship from Wilson for some rackets. And so she brought them to play with and she just said it felt really weird. So I asked if I could look at it and I kind of gave it a once over and told her that they made a mistake and gave her a left-handed racket when she was right-handed.
I panicked.
She's like, oh my gosh, what did they do?
I panicked. And then I went around to every single person that was at the clinic that night. And I was like, do you guys have a left-handed racket? Like, do you guys know about this? And then everyone played along and I looked like an idiot. So that was fun. That's one of the many things that Greg has done to me.
Memorable, all memorable.
All memorable and all character building.
Exactly. You're welcome.
So you grew up in San Diego. Do you think that played a huge part in where you are today as an adapted athlete?
I think it definitely plays a role. I think that we're really lucky to live in a place that has amazing weather, so you can play outdoor sports all the time. And I think that affords you different abilities to be exposed to, like I was saying, water sports. Like most adaptive sports camps wouldn't be including that. So just exposure to all sorts of different sports is, I think, more something that you're more able to be exposed to when you live in a climate like San Diego has. Also being in a big city with a pretty good infrastructure, you have things like what you guys are doing, or you have like the San Diego Adaptive Sports Foundation, you've got Parks and Rec, like pretty established things. So there are programs. I know that if you live in a smaller city, the chances of you being exposed to a pretty good program that has chairs you can try and stuff like that is pretty minimal. So I think growing up in a city like San Diego definitely helped.
Yeah, you mentioned that like the weather is good all year, and I just thought of the CAF like surfing event.
Yeah.
And how people come from like all over the country just to San Diego to participate in this adaptive surfing clinic, and it's super fun.
Totally.
Can you tell us some of your stats and credentials and some of your accomplishments throughout your career?
Sure. I always get awkward when I do this because it feels weird to brag about myself. So I think in juniors I ended as like the world number 5. For women's, I've been ranked as high as number 9 in singles internationally and 4 in doubles internationally. And I'm currently the number 1 US female. I won a gold and a bronze medal at the recent Pan American Games. I've been on Team USA and competed for Team USA at different World Team Cups since 2008. I think that's probably the most exciting things about me. I don't think I have any other like really cool accolades, but that's pretty much it.
You won mixed doubles in Bolton.
That's right. Definitely
Right.
did. Steve.
So
That
you-
should have been the first thing that I mentioned. I'm
That
sorry.
was the pinnacle of my career.
That was like my turning point. That's when I knew that tennis was for me.
So you do participate in doubles tournaments and doubles matches?
Yeah, so I think that's where wheelchair tennis is different from able-bodied tennis. And on the able-bodied side, people specialize in either singles or doubles, and wheelchair tennis is different in that nobody specializes, and that every tournament that we play, I mean, you can choose not to, but most players play singles and doubles at every event that we have.
That sounds fun.
Yeah,
I always love, like, I was a swimmer and I always loved relays and stuff more than
yeah,
my
it's
individual
more fun.
event.
I'm the same. I think growing up playing a team sport makes me like working with other people. And like, obviously it's fun when you're playing singles if you're playing well, because then you know that it's all because of you. Although like when you're not playing well, you know it's all your fault. So that's not that great. But when you're playing doubles, I think obviously the court's a little bit bigger. You can do more dynamic things. You get to work with someone. It's more exciting. And I think I play better when I know other people need me to perform for them. So I love doubles.
So do you like doubles more than singles, or they're like about the same?
I like doubles more than singles for sure.
Bria and Josh were asking, who is your doubles partner?
So I don't have a consistent doubles partner just because there's not another American that's like consistently on the tour. In Tokyo, I don't even know who my partner is going to be. So we'll see. But I play a lot with someone named KG Monjane. She's from South Africa and she's one of my really good friends on tour. So I play with her a lot. But what's really cool is that like basically everyone on tour is really close. It's almost like high school. Like you see each other all the time. There's like gossip, there's like couples, there's rumors and all that stuff. But basically like depending on what tournament you're going to during the year, you can call up your friends like, do you want to play doubles at this event? Which other ones are you going to? So you can kind of switch around and play with whoever you want. Sometimes different countries require you to play with the same person from your country in order to like prepare for the games or different championships, but I haven't had to do that for the US. So it's kind of been nice because I get to learn from different players and be exposed to different things.
Yeah, that's super cool. You get to play with like players from other countries.
Yeah.
So do you participate in any other adaptive sports, or tennis is your favorite only sport?
Right now, I don't really have time to do any other sports. So tennis is definitely like the only one. But like I was saying before, in high school, I played basketball. That was like really good cross training for tennis, and that was really fun. Before that, I did rugby a little bit, but I'd say tennis has been like the main thing that I've done for a long time.
Wheelchair is scary.
It's so fun.
Yeah, it looks
The
fun.
one
It's
thing
like,
that I really want to try though is ice hockey or like sled hockey. That looks so cool. I think I'd slice my finger off, but I think I'd love to try it.
you know, I had some guest speakers from CAF, and one of them, Eva, she played hockey in high school and college, and she is like working on a sled hockey team.
Really?
Yeah, so
I'm
if you want
coming
her
out. I want to try it.
yeah, if you want her contact information, let me know.
Totally. I want to try.
Yeah, it looks super cool. So it's amazing how some of these athletes adapt the sports, and
I know.
it's crazy. Okay. What advice would you give to younger athletes wanting to or already involved in the adaptive sports movement?
I think that my advice would be to just try as many different sports as possible. I think kind of like what I was alluding to before, like my recognition or just awareness of disabled sports or adaptive sports was almost zero. And so for me, like coming in and being able to be at a multi-sport camp was kind of like a luxury because I had all these different sports at my feet. But for the average kid, I'd say just try everything. Like I didn't really have a passion for tennis prior to my injury, so I wouldn't have tried it had my mom not signed me up for like a bajillion different sports camps. And then that's how I figured out something that I'm really passionate about now. So I think it's really easy to pigeonhole yourself into one thing. It's like, well, basketball looks cool, that's what I'm going to play. But you don't really learn about yourself or be exposed to different people, different things if you don't try a lot of stuff. So I would say try as many different things as you can. And that's kind of how you realize that your disability doesn't really hold you back as much as you might think. And you realize that like how much function you actually do have by trying different sports. So that's my advice.
Yeah, we've heard that from a couple other athletes too.
Oh, good.
Everyone,
Consistency.
yes, everyone thinks that, you know, try different things. Even able-bodied athletes trying wheelchair or adapted athletics, or for example, like we do sitting volleyball sometimes. Pre-COVID times, we played sitting volleyball, and it's super fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Does it,
Exposure is good. Like we do that a lot here at the USTA campus. Like a lot of the able-bodied players will come out and try it, and it's just good for people to be exposed to new stuff.
does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna give a minute for other people's questions. Okay. What are some of the challenges you faced throughout your athletic career?
Knowing Greg has been really hard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Challenges. You know, I think that growing up in the States and having to compete, I'm sure that Steve and Greg can attest to this too. Having to compete against other countries that have a lot more money or like a better infrastructure for their national teams is kind of difficult. Like for instance, Japan right now, because of Tokyo coming up, they have all sorts of resources literally at their feet that we unfortunately don't have here, because America's a little bit behind in terms of really accepting the Paralympic movement, throwing a lot of money at it. And then that's kind of where our resources would come from. So I think that's been a disadvantage in terms of not really being able to compete on a level playing field with other people that have physios at their disposal all the time, or sports psychologists or things like that. I'm really lucky that ever since moving to Orlando, I do have that now. Not at tournaments that I'm going to travel to. Like I can't afford to bring a whole entourage with me like some other players do. But I would say that's probably been a big challenge or a disadvantage. Aside from that, I don't really feel like my sporting career has had too many disadvantages. If anything, I've just been really lucky to get to do all the things that I have, like seeing the world, making the friends that I've been able to make, having the experiences I've had. I don't think it'd be fair for me to say that it's been like a huge struggle, because it really hasn't.
So you mentioned the entourage that people come with sometimes.
Yeah.
So most of our members are kinesiology or health majors.
Uh-huh.
Might be interested in working with like the Paralympic movement or the adapted athletics movement. Can you list a couple of professionals that you work with that could be an example for some of our members?
Yeah, so basically at tournaments, players will bring like a physio with them, or like a physical therapist. That's probably the main thing for when you have injuries, or I guess when you don't, like for preventative stuff. Some people would bring a sports psychologist, but that's more rare. But really also just to be able to bring a coach with you is a huge luxury. Like you would really have to pay them pretty much a massive salary for them to leave and travel with you. And that's something that a lot of us can't afford to do, because we make a lot less money than the able-bodied counterparts, or just in America, like I was saying, we make less money than other people in other countries. So those top three are probably the ones that would be applicable to coming on the road. But there's also like strength and conditioning. That's something that some people might bring with them. That's something that I know every person has at home, but whether or not they would bring that person on the road is kind of up to the person.
Do you have any advice for our members that may be interested in working with adapted athletes?
In terms of like how to get involved, or?
Just how to work with adapted athletes the best, and any tips for working with adapted athletes that may be different than working with able-bodied athletes?
You better not say stay away from Greg.
Number one, stay away from Greg. he has COVID and it's serious. I think
Very funny.
I know. I think that a big part of working with adaptive athletes is, number one, recognizing that they're still athletes. I think it's really easy to look at someone in a wheelchair and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to work with them. Or like if you're a tennis coach looking at someone that sits in a chair, being like, well, they're not going to be playing the same tennis as someone does on their feet. The only difference with adaptive athletes is that we move differently. When it comes to playing a sport or lifting weights, a lot of it is the same. You might have to literally adapt something so that they can lift up a weight or do certain things like that. But at the end of the day, you're trying to accomplish the same goal. So it really is just about being creative. It's not, I don't think there's ever a thing to say like, they're adaptive, so I'm going to have to learn a completely different way to work with them, and it's a completely different thing. It's really not. What you know as a professional will definitely apply. You just have to find like a more creative way to get things done.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a topic that's come up in the past a lot with other adapted athletes, saying it's pretty much the same. You just need to be a little more creative, think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
So Kelly's asking, you just earned your master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
How did you balance school with your training?
I have no idea. Sometimes when I think back, I really don't know how I did that. I got really lucky in that my program was really understanding of my training, and then vice versa. But I also had to make a lot of sacrifices. So I would only train when I was living in London to get my master's. I only trained twice a week, whereas like my competitors train every single day. So that was something that I knew I kind of had to give up in order to make school work. But that was something that I knew was really important. I can't play tennis for my entire life, and I need to have a plan B or something to fall back on, which is also something I'm passionate about. It's not just something that's like a fail safe, but it's something that was really important for me to have. Because who knows if I get an injury tomorrow and then my tennis career is done. I need to have something else to do with my life and provide for myself. So that was just kind of something that I had to have the mindset of. What did I study? I studied audiology for Sierra, who just asked that. If you don't know what that is, that's like a hearing doctor. So that's what I studied, and that's what I had to do, like clinical rotations, did all of that stuff this past 2 years. So tennis definitely kind of had to take a little bit of like a back burner. I still competed at the same time. So I had to micromanage myself a lot. You have to make sacrifices socially. You have to make sacrifices in terms of, you know, like having, if I want to have downtime, I don't necessarily get to always have that. I have to kind of like compartmentalize my brain into different modes. But I think it kind of helped that when I was burnt out from school, I got to kind of switch and play tennis. And then when my brain was tired from tennis, I got to switch and do school. So I didn't necessarily have a lot of like lazy days, but my brain did kind of get to have a break, if that makes sense. And I like being busy, so it worked out.
Yeah, it's a good stress reliever to have an activity to do on the side.
For sure.
Taylor asks, which university did you earn your master's from?
I got my master's from University College London. It's one of like the universities of London. Before going there, I didn't realize that there were like 20 of those, but it's one of those.
Awesome. So you lived in London for how long?
I lived there from 2017 to February of this year.
Like
2.5 years.
How's the adaptive athletics scene like over there?
It's amazing. I've always kind of said that I think America, in terms of being physically adapted, is the best in the world. But in terms of like culturally, I think we're behind. One of the reasons that I wanted to move to England was just how they accept people. I feel like obviously living in central London physically was not amazing. Like there's a lot of things that are not accessible, but in terms of people's attitudes, it's very different. Like when they would see me with my tennis chair getting onto the tube or things like that, I would be asked if I was a Paralympian or things like that, where I'm sure any of the adaptive athletes on this call can attest to, like if the people see you out and about, they ask if you're a Special Olympian, or they ask if you're a racer, or they ask all sorts of like really mundane, annoying questions that we get asked all the time. And those just don't happen overseas. So it was really refreshing to be seen as like an athlete and a human being, as opposed to like a charity case. But just even in terms of like representation in the media over there, it's very different. You'll see people in wheelchairs on everyday sitcoms on television. You'll see adaptive athletes on like huge billboards that they have, or different advertisements on TV. So I think culturally there's just a lot more awareness. I think it's easier because they're a very small country and they hosted a games in 2012, which makes a big difference. So maybe in America that'll change when LA hosts the games, but we're very much behind.
Yeah, it's interesting that the fit, like physically, it's probably just because everything's old, huh? It's like
Yeah.
all historical.
Yeah, because if you go further out, yeah, if you go further out in England where things are more modern, then everything is accessible. But in the heart of London, it's kind of a nightmare.
Yeah. So we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
Bree and Justin were wondering if you know sign language.
I learned some sign language back when I was in college. Weirdly, it's not a requirement for my degree. I think it should be, but it's not. But I took 2 years of sign language, and I'm embarrassed to say that one of the only things I remember is that, I don't know if you guys have heard of this city named Yuma. It's like in between San Diego and Tucson. That's where I went to college, so I would drive through there a lot. And I remember, yes, I remember learning that the sign for Yuma is the same as the sign for boring, and it's like this or something. And it fits because that city is, there's nothing there. But that's all I remember.
My brother is in the Marines and he's stationed in Yuma right now.
Oh, really? You'll have to teach him that sign and ask him if he thinks it's true that it represents being boring, because I think it does.
Yeah. So what was your training
Dana,
like?
what?
While you were in... Oh, go ahead, Akil.
Oh, I was just gonna say, being a student, as well as an adapted athlete at the time when you were in Arizona, do you have any advice for any of our students, that stuff you had to go through or experiences that you wish you would have known more about, or, you know, just some advice for them starting off?
You mean in terms of like being a student athlete in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just really embrace the fact that you get to be a student athlete. That's something that not many people will ever get to say that they've done. Like to be at San Diego State playing tennis, that's huge. For me to be able to do that at Arizona was a big thing. So I think really embrace the fact that you have that opportunity. It definitely does kick you in the butt a lot more than the average student, because you have to wake up, you have to go to practices, you have to do extra things. You might have to sacrifice social times. Maybe you can't go to like a big party on a weekend or something because you have a tournament or whatever. But I think it is a big opportunity to grow. I know that I wouldn't probably have had the mindset that I do now about being able to manage my time and like set goals and really follow through, unless that was really instilled in me when I was in college, because I had to really micromanage myself. So it's kind of a thing where it might not really be fun, but know that managing your time that way and being really strict about it is really good for you, and it'll really pay off in the long run. And it's also really fun. Like playing sports in college is awesome. You get to meet a lot of people that way. It's great.
Awesome, thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about what your training was like in college, in your master's program, and then what it's like when you're preparing for like an Olympic Games?
Sure. When I was in college, we had, it really wasn't that super demanding. I should say that it was, but it really wasn't. We had practice at 6 a.m. every weekday for about 2 hours, I think. And then we had it again later, I think 3 different days a week, like later in the afternoon. It's so long ago. That's so embarrassing that college was so long ago. I can't really remember. But I think that's what our training schedule was like. We also had to go in and lift at least 3 days a week with our own like personal program, but that was more or less on us to go and get it done. And if we didn't, then we got in trouble. And then we would go to tournaments throughout the year. So that wasn't ever really like crazy demanding. In terms of what I did the last couple years, like I said, it was a lot more pared down. So I really only trained like 2 days a week. And then I didn't really have a gym schedule because like in London, it was hard to find a gym that I could get to because I didn't have a car. I actually ended up training out in a place called Oxford. So I would have to take the train all the way out there, stay overnight. So it was more or less like an ordeal getting to and from tennis. So I would say that my training the last 2 years was definitely not something that people should aspire to be doing because it wasn't great. It did the job, but it wasn't ideal. But my training now that I'm preparing for Tokyo is very different. It's something I've never had. Kind of like what I was alluding to before, the US isn't really primed for Paralympic athletes to have the same level of training that the able-bodied ones do. But that's kind of starting to change. And tennis is no different. So the USTA's main hub, or like they call it the national campus, is here in Orlando. And I saw the opportunity to come here and train full time in their player development kind of section. So it literally is like my full-time job now. Every single day, I have 2 training sessions. I also have gym sessions that I have to go to. Oh, I hear an echo. Is that from me?
I heard it a little too, but it's fine now.
So I also have like a sports psychologist that I work with at least once to twice a week. I have nutrition stuff that I have to do. So it's definitely like a huge undertaking compared to what I was doing before. But in terms of like the opportunity to train and prepare for the games, this is like the best that I could have ever dreamed of having. It literally is like my full-time job now. So definitely much better preparations than what I had the past 2 years, but that wasn't hard to do.
Has your training changed since COVID started, or has it been pretty much untouched?
It definitely was changed when we were on lockdown and that like the tennis courts were shut. That was from like maybe, I think it was March until May. Like Florida's been insane. They just opened everything. No one wore masks for a long time. So there was only a small amount of lockdown. But during that time, we were given different workouts to do at home. We were told to basically like do pushing drills outside, to do cardio, things like that. When I was living in the house, the dirty house that I mentioned in the beginning, we did have a really big living room area. And so we made like a makeshift tennis court and we're kind of like practicing volleys and playing mini tennis and things like that. But yeah, a lot of it was really just strength conditioning at home. So in terms of like actual tennis skills, those really dropped. But yeah, there's only so much tennis that you can really do when you're at home, aside from like shadow swings and little things like that. But luckily, the USTA is like kind of a little bubble in and of itself. So they open back up pretty soon, and they have us do a lot of like, temperature checks. We have to fill out papers every day, like attesting to the fact that we don't have COVID. We're not allowed to interact with other people outside of it when we're there. And so I've been able to go back training full time basically since March. So my training hasn't really been affected since then. So I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, super lucky. So you mentioned you work with a sports psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what a sports psychologist does?
Yeah, so tennis is super mental, as anyone that plays tennis on this call can attest to. Like you're literally out there on an island by yourself, with the exception of doubles. But even then, you're like more nervous because you're having to play for someone, or you might mess up and make them mad. Like there's all sorts of crazy thoughts that you can have when you're playing tennis, and a lot of times they're destructive. Because it's always like, well, if I hit this ball, I'm going to mess up, or you hit a really terrible shot and then you're mad at yourself, or, like you lose a game on some stupid technicality or some error. So your brain can really get in the way a lot in tennis. And it really helps to learn from sports psychologists who literally are trained to work with athletes in terms of, and not just tennis. Like I think that there's sports psychologists for pretty much any sport. I don't know the ins and outs of what they would do for someone that's like a track athlete or something. But in terms of tennis, they work with me a lot on like in between point routines. So basically trying to make it so that every single point I play, regardless of how important it is during the match, like whether it's a match point, set point, or whatever, they all feel the same based on what I do in between them. So like breathing exercises to calm myself down, different rituals. Like I'm sure if you guys have watched any professional tennis, you see Nadal do his like insane stuff that he does, but he does it every single time. So every point that he plays feels the same. And that's kind of what you learn. Like the sports psychologist here tries to put me in like stressful situations so that my brain can learn to like adapt to them, things like that. So
That's super cool. I
Yeah,
didn't, I wasn't really aware that. What'd you say?
I said that's the area I struggle the most, so I need a lot of help.
I wasn't aware that that was a thing, really.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
Super cool. Akil says he has 3 questions for you.
Okay, bring it on.
Actually, I just wanted to point out, did you see Naomi's question?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, do that one first. Naomi asked,
Okay.
do you see yourself coaching others in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of my career was shaped by people like Steve and Greg who were willing to take the time to coach me, and I learned so much from them. And I've also been able to like give back at different sports camps with little kids, and I feel like it's such a privilege to be able to kind of give back in the same way that people gave to me when I was younger. And that's the way that you kind of help adaptive sports grow. Like, we are such a small little world. It feels big when you're kind of inside it, but from the outside looking in, it really is like a really confined little thing. And the only way to make that grow is if you kind of reach out and give back. So I would absolutely love to do that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, first of my actual 3 questions. All right. The actual 3 questions. We have Liam B. It looks like we have Liam B on the phone right now. Tell me.
It's on Zoom like 15 times a day. I don't think like once a month. So he gets the title.
There you go. There you go. Hey, can you tell me, Dana, your favorite memory of Steve Baldwin?
Ooh. I don't know if I have one favorite memory. I remember that when I used to come out to Barnes and we would play doubles together. I remember, didn't you reference like Brick House, or like then you became Brother Bear, and like we had all these different,
yeah,
we had different names that we would call each other, and like he just always made tennis really fun. Like he would joke about things. I think he would sing sometimes.
constantly.
So I don't really have one specific memory. I do think about Steve a lot when I hit backhands, because there was a time that he really worked with me like before Rio on hitting a one-handed backhand, and he always told me do this like coil thing and then like reverse. So I do think of Steve a lot, but I don't know if I have like one specific crazy memory, just lots of little ones.
The Brother Bear, those nights, those freezing nights.
Yeah.
The program would meet Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And in December and in January, it'd be 40 degrees. But who cared? We were out playing tennis. It was awesome.
Good time.
Got you. That's interesting. You know, we gotta get Coach Steve on a karaoke machine. It sounds like I gotta.
He's like Michael Bublé. Like, give him a mic.
Wonderful. Next question for you. Yeah. Dana, what? You've traveled around the world and been competing. I'm curious. What is your favorite dish from any of the places that you've been? What was like your favorite food? Like, oh my God, this place had this.
That's such a good question. Favorite food. I mean, I'm a huge sweet tooth person, so I love going to like Belgium or anywhere in Europe because there's like pastries everywhere you look. So that in terms of food is probably my favorite, but my favorite place to go, I love going to Asia. I think I just love like the culture. It actually really feels like you're somewhere far away. I know that sounds silly because like when you go to Europe, you obviously are far away from your home, but for some reason, like those westernized cultures don't feel as different as when you really immerse yourself in like an Asian one. So although maybe they're not like my favorite foods, that is my favorite place to go.
Got you. We'll take it. Last question for you. You know, I asked you to talk a little bit about Coach Baldwin. I'm curious. With Greg over here, Greg to me has some of the funniest comebacks to certain things, and just some of the funniest jokes. I'm curious, what is maybe the funniest joke or comeback that you heard from Coach Greg that you could like kind of like recollect, or maybe you could tell me how it made you feel?
Appropriate.
There's too many. I don't know if they're all appropriate. Let me think. I think that I don't know if it's a comeback, but one of the funniest moments I ever had with Greg was, well, there's two things, and Greg can talk about it, but do you remember Beans, Greg?
Yes, absolutely.
So I got surgery on my legs when I was in like 8th grade, and Greg came over and he gave me this dog named Beans, and it farted. And I know you guys don't know me that well, but like farts to me are the funniest thing ever. Like people that don't think farts are funny are dead inside. So he gave me this dog that literally, like when you squeeze its paw or something, like it makes like various fart noises and then whimpers afterwards, like it was painful. And that was pretty funny. But I think there was one time that he made me laugh so hard that I choked on corn.
Yes.
What
With
did you say
Tammy,
to me,
you
though?
kept saying you aspirated corn.
Because I did. It like went into my nose holes.
We were doing like a barbecue on your back patio.
That's right. I don't remember what you were talking about, or like the junk that you were spewing from your mouth at that point, but I just remember it was really funny and I could not keep food down and corn literally went into my nose. I don't recommend it. But Greg is funny. Like, I mean, that's like asking me to like pick one drop of water from like an ocean. Like Greg just says things and they're funny. So it's hard to pick one thing.
Got you. And I appreciate you sharing, and and I appreciate you at least trying your best to keep it PG-13 for everybody. I know these guys have been doing some very interesting things and saying some interesting things, but no, and also just in general, thank you so much for presenting to everybody here in AAS. I think there's some more questions for you, but thank you so much
for having me.
What is one picture you would not like us to share from you right now?
Greg?
And he have it on his phone.
Well, Brian's already shared the most embarrassing photo of me with headgear. He posted it on his Instagram, so that's embarrassing. Maybe when I got tubby when I was in Arizona, that's embarrassing because there's a photo where we're in like our team jackets and I couldn't even zip mine up, so that was great. I don't know, Greg, you probably have a lot of embarrassing photos of me. Just don't upload it.
Has there ever been any issues where when you were playing like college tennis where you had to take a break, or you decided not to play for a little while? And if so, maybe you want to talk about that?
Sure, I can talk about that. What a segue. So when I would say maybe it was my sophomore year of college, I kind of got burnt out from tennis. And I think that was maybe due to the fact that when I first started playing, it was because it was what like my mom had kind of wanted me to do. Not saying that I didn't like tennis and that I didn't have fun, but I think it was something that I never really chose to do on my own. And it was something that I did so often that I kind of got burnt out from it. So when I went to college and I kind of had all these new different experiences, I wanted to kind of experience that and kind of leave tennis for a little while. So I did. I didn't really play tennis for about 3 years. And then I think it was maybe 2014, 2015 that I kind of realized that I wanted to, like, tennis was such a big part of my identity that I realized that I kind of wanted that back. And I think having that break was one of the best things that I could have ever done, because when I went back to tennis, it was because I knew that I really wanted to do that for myself. And there was the big hurdle of like qualifying for Rio at that time. And that gave me a big goal to set. And that was, I think that break, although it was something that kind of made me fall behind the rest of my competitors on the tour, I think it was really, really good mentally for my health, because if I kept playing through it, I probably would have started to hate tennis. I wouldn't have really had the drive to compete and train the way that you have to do. And so I think for anyone that feels like a sport is kind of wearing on them or it's not really fun anymore, not that sport's going to be fun every single day, but if it's not something that you wake up wanting to do or loving to do, then that's time to take a break and kind of reevaluate. And you can always come back to it, but it's good to give yourself breaks from things.
That's super good advice. Thank you for that, Dana. Justin and Bree, do you have a question?
Yeah, so actually one of my questions You had talked about how you actually don't have a lot of downtime, especially since your training just picked up a lot actually recently in this past year. I am still curious though, when you do have those moments to yourself, what do you tend to do? What are those things that you like or your hobbies that are not sports related, not school related, things that you just do for yourself and like keep you sane, to be honest?
I become a full-on sloth. Like, I wish I had a lot of hobbies that I could tell you, like, oh, I come home and I like crochet and then I like, you know, knit something. Like, I don't. I'm so lazy. I literally turn on Netflix and like I become a complete sloth. Like, the amount of things that I've binged, like when Tiger King was a thing, I watched that straight through. I don't know if you guys have watched The Staircase, watch that straight through in like a day. So yeah, I think I just go in modes where I'm really like on, or I'm completely off and I just don't do anything. Oh, what's my favorite Netflix show right now? If you guys like murder mystery type of shows, Broadchurch is really good. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's really good. It's a British show about like, there's basically like a kid has been murdered and then they have to figure out what happened. So that's really good. I watched The Crown. That's kind of boring. Schitt's Creek is really funny if you want a funny show. That's a good one.
I heard Schitt's Creek is super funny.
Ew, David. I love that show. Let's see what else. I like to bake. That's something that I've been doing a lot. My coach here actually, like, we do bets with each other, and I actually lost a bet today, so I have to make him cookies tonight. So baking is something that I enjoy doing. But aside from that, I don't really have a lot of like hobbies per se. Aside from like when I do have downtime, I like to see my friends, things like that. Oh, I do have a weird obsession with escape rooms. I don't know if you guys have done those, but I think they're so fun.
Mm-hmm.
Any pets?
Yeah.
Those are so much fun.
Well, when you're like a super high level athlete and then you're also in a master's program, I would just want to sleep and watch Netflix after.
It's literally all I did. Like, I would wear PJs and just look like a troll all day. It was the best.
Yeah. You need your
That's
days off.
kind of normal.
Well, yeah, I would try to emulate Greg. I was like, well, how would Greg look on any given day? And then that's how I would present myself.
I aspire for trollhood.
Yes.
Mission
Dream big.
accomplished, Greg. Mission accomplished.
All right. Does anyone have any questions before we head back to our slides? Any questions? Thank you so much for coming, Dana. We really appreciate
Thank you for having me. This was really fun. And it's so cool to see everyone and all my old friends.
I'll send you Eva's contact so you can play sled hockey.
Yes, please. We should all go. Make it
I'm down. Maybe post-COVID though. I don't know. COVID.
I don't think my mom let me out of her little bubble when I come home for Christmas anyway, but post-COVID for sure.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. We're going to head back to our slides. Feel free to log off. Anyone who doesn't want to hear our announcements, you can log off if you would
Thanks,
like.
everyone. It was so good to see you guys.
Thank you, Dana.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
All right, so anyone left here, if you are interested in getting more involved with AAS next year, we are looking for e-board members for next year, not next semester. Next semester, we will be starting our transition. So if you're interested, please let us know. We can give you more information. There will be a Google form emailed out with signups for interested people. And then there's no experience required. Obviously, you'll get all your training on the job. All right, and that's all we have. Thank you guys so much for attending our GBMs. Bree and Justin, what is going on?
Okay, I'm about to expose her right now, but she has been out of view because she's eating chocolate and it's just falling everywhere. I'm trying to keep it in my mouth, but it's not staying. So for you guys' information, that's what's happening.
All right, well, everyone have a great holiday. Enjoy your break. We'll see you next semester. We have decided that our next semester GBM time will be Mondays at 11 a.m. Mondays at 11 a.m. And we'll obviously announce that more over winter break. But if you want to plan out your schedule, go ahead. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns?
Dana was so bubbly and cute. She's great.
Hi,
Big fan,
Harari.
big fan. Hi. Made it.
Yes.
I just want to say thanks for everyone who came out, to all the members who came to join, for a lot of the speakers. It was really great having you guys here and listening in. We're really excited to do more and be involved with you guys next semester. So continue to come on out. And if you guys have any questions or even want to be more involved, just reach out to the email. I think there's one more slide. I don't know if the emails or anything's on there, but definitely just like reach out. We're all here and we'd love to hear more from you guys, or yeah, if you guys have any questions or concerns. But good luck with your finals. Everyone finished strong. Woo! And excited to end 2020. So let's go.
Woo!
Alrighty. So I guess we can stop the recording.